What would this world look like if the performing arts, but arts in general, are not there? Do we feel naturally? Do we feel naturally? Do you ever feel anything naturally? Or are we trained to feel? What are the values that are central to human development? I had a student who could never imagine a parrot because she's never seen one in real life. She Googled it, but it was never the same as ever seeing a parrot in real, and therefore she couldn't hold the parrot in her hand as if it were a real thing. This remained for her a gesture for a long time until I forced her to go to some nearby, green environment to actually see if there is a parrot that she can find in. So, I mean, there are all kinds of problems with the new generation, is what I'm trying to say. So now the question, therefore, is not just in loving the arts, because we always think love is sufficient. Feeling or emotion is something that we learn, we repeat, and we embody. The arts have always played a very critical role in all our lives. We need to find the necessity, the meaning, the purpose for why we need the arts. Once we understand the need, then I think building the love is so easy.
Namaskar. A very good morning and welcome to WishwaTalks. My name is Trishant. Let me take you into a journey of a young girl from Chennai who stepped into the world of dance at just 3 years old. What began as a passion slowly became a deeper exploration of life itself. Swarnamalya Ganesh didn't just learn Bharatnatyam, she questioned it, understood it, and uncovered the stories and meanings hidden within it. For her, performing arts were never just about learning steps, but about building identity, awareness, and connection. With a PhD in dance history and years of experience as both a performer and researcher, she has dedicated her journey to showing us that the arts are not just something we love, but something we may truly need. As we explore today's theme, learning the performing arts, love it or need it, we are about to hear from someone who has lived that very question. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Swarnamalya Ganesh.
Thank you so much for a very warm welcome. Right. Firstly, I'm very happy to return to WishwaTalks yet again. I think this is my second engagement with your organization, and I'm very happy to be here this morning. You've invited me to speak about something that I think I continue to both speak and practice in my everyday life, both professionally and personally. So, this is a topic that's very close to my heart. Let me begin with a caveat. I am a dance performer with a PhD in performance history, and I'm a professor of dance history and global arts at Kriya University. But I'm also a lawyer. So I'm somebody who comes from long lineage of educators, but also I'm here not to speak of the arts as an alternative to academic accomplishment, but as a way to achieve better accomplishment within the academic world. So I just, because often people think that artists, when they speak of the importance of the arts, they are people who are anathemic to academic pursuit. Not at all. So as a professional, as someone who is, who has pursued a professional degree in law, as someone who practices both law and dance, I can firmly say that despite having an array of academic accomplishments and interests, I still come back to the world saying we need the arts. And today I will tell you why. Is it a love or necessity for the arts? I mean, everybody in India, we have been taught. I presume all of us here who have gathered are from this part of the country. And whether it is this country or the subcontinent at large, the arts have always played a very critical role in all our lives. So there is no denying that any one of us, if we are asked whether the arts are important, and for that matter, performing arts particularly are important, nobody is going to turn around and say, no, it's not important. So we all know that it's a part of our life. even those who vehemently desist being artistic are, I'm sure, in some way a film watcher, or, who likes listening to music. Or any form of engagement with the art means that there is a love or a certain need for the arts. The question here is, do we simply remain in that space where we love the arts? Or do we also now, in this 21st century, at this turn of a time when humans are vastly now interacting with machines, do we at this moment ask ourselves the question, is art to remain merely a love, for some of us a passion, for some of us a profession, but for most of us merely a love for it, a time, a thing that we go to when we have some spare time, or something to relax ourselves with? Or is it in fact a necessity to our life? To this, I would ask fundamentally a few questions to ourselves. What are the values that are central to human development? Because Vishwas is also talking about the overall development of the human mind and body. I think this is a very relevant question to ask ourselves. And I don't have to give these answers to this audience, but, and this is not by any means an exhaustive list of values, but these are some of the fundamental values that we need, not for a citizen development, not for a woman development, not for a man development, not for a great career development, but for a human development. Of course, we need knowledge systems. I mean, whether it be education, or whether it be hereditary knowledge, or whether it be traditional knowledge, or new age machine learning, we need all kinds of knowledge systems. We need some sort of discipline. And by discipline, what I mean is a self-regulation, a way to understand how to function within these knowledge systems. I think that kind of discipline is really fundamental. We need, of course, patience. One can never stress the importance of it, but it's something that has become rather overrated today in a world where Instagram reels give you instant gratification. But there is a value in developing patience that helps one stay with the things that they want to pursue. So patience is a great value still for human development, contrary to how we are training our brains. Memory, which is also fast evaporating within our systems because of, again, the overload of data that is available for us, at the click of our button. But memory itself, whether it's human or machine, even to the machine, it's humans who feed that memory. So memory itself can never be overrated in human development. There is, of course, imagination, which then later will, of course, extend to creativity and other things. But fundamentally, the power to imagine, the ability to imagine, I think that's such a critical part. I often, when I teach dance to my students, I realize that they struggle to imagine certain things. It may not be within their immediate experience, but all art is born out of good imagination. But young people sometimes struggle to imagine certain things that has never crossed paths in their life. For example, I had a student who could never imagine a parrot because she's never seen one in real life. She Googled it, but it was never the same as ever seeing a parrot in real, and therefore she couldn't hold the parrot in her hand as if it were a real thing. This remained for her a gesture for a long time, until I forced her to go to some nearby, green environment to actually see if there is a parrot that she can find in. So, I mean, there are all kinds of problems with the new generation, is what I'm trying to say. So there's imagination, empathy, which can never be stressed more than ever before, critical thinking. I think all knowledge streams demand that we not just absorb knowledge, but also have a way to critically rethink about it. Power and agency, which I think all of us require, irrespective of gender, irrespective of status, irrespective of other kinds of stratification. We constantly strive for power and agency. Capacity to resist, because if there is no power, if there is no agency, then comes the need to resist. So we must have those capacities. Resilience to recreate, because often things that we create are destructed. So we must have the resilience to recreate. Adaptability and public cultures. I mean, I have just put these down as a broad understanding of what might be necessary for human development. But I doubt this is exhaustive by any means. I'm sure people here can add more to this list. You can continue to add. But fundamentally, I'm going to address some of these and ask ourselves, what is it that makes the arts critical component in this human development exercise? Yes. I think before I even take any of this further, I'd like to ask myself a question. Do we feel naturally? Do we feel naturally? Do you ever feel anything naturally? Or are we trained to feel, right? Is feeling a natural thing? Do you wake up, or are children born and do they begin to feel? Or do we train them to feel about things, right? This is my mother. This is my father. This is my home. Whatever, any sort of feeling. This is where I need to come back after I go to school for a long day. Or this is the house I need to protect, or this is the home I need to build. Whatever, any form of belonging, any form of feeling of belonging, or any other feeling really, is it quite natural to humans, or are we being trained by either ourselves or our nature or our surroundings? So where does feeling live in our lives today is a very critical question I keep asking myself every day, because some of the times I need to understand where my feelings come from. So I have a few key ideas I want to share about this particular concept before I take you through the rest of what I want to say. So the key idea here is feeling, which really translates as emotion, because what you feel is an emotion, right? I mean, you feel happy today, that's an emotion. You feel sad, you feel upset, you're frustrated, you're vexed by what's happening, you're bored as I'm speaking. Any one of this is a feeling. But this feeling is also the emotion that holds you at that moment. And there is a wonderful theoretical background to this by Baudrillard, the philosopher, who says that emotion can be practiced, or emotion can be brought in as practices. This is not very new to artists like me, because we work in the realm of emotion. We are trained from a very young age to identify how we feel and nurture it back to how we want to feel. This the arts help us do. And they do it in a very non-cognitive way. In the sense, it's almost muscle memory, because I start learning at the age of 3 and 4, and I'm beginning to express happiness and sorrow and any number of rasas, which we call emotions. And somewhere, as I'm imagining it, as I'm emoting it, I'm also feeling it. So in the process of emoting happiness, I'm already becoming happy. So that's a practice that I have. But for a non-practitioner, I want to bring emotion as a practice, because it's not as if, I shared this with a friend of mine who's an environmental scientist. And when I said, do you feel naturally? He laughed. He said, what? When was the last time I ever spoke about feelings? He said, I avoid even human relationships, including romantic relationships, because I don't want to talk about feelings. And here I am sitting with a colleague who's asking me about feelings. So that's how afraid some humans are, or some streams of knowledge are, to the idea of emotion. But here I am speaking about emotion as practice. So I say that feeling or emotion is something that we learn, we repeat, and we embody. We learn it, we repeat it over and over again. You feel happy, you learn how to feel happy, and then you learn how to feel happy again and again and again. And that's why you want to do the same things that once made you happy, or find other things that make you similarly happy, and then you embody it. When there is an emotion, we often embody it, right? When you're happy, you dance, you sing, or you smile, or you twirl, or you go out, or you have happy lunch. But when you're sad, you cry. The tears are there. That's natural. But you also curl up in a corner. You also stop talking to people. You don't take the phone calls. There are ways in which we embody our feelings constantly. And this is, I'm not even talking about artists here. I'm talking about all of us. Right? So the historic nature of emotions, we will all say, oh, emotions are universal. They are universal, but they are also not universal, in the sense they are shaped by time, culture, and history. What is a certain emotion to us may not be the same emotion to someone else in another part of the world, right? So something that is sacred to us may not be sacred to someone else. Something that is beautiful to us may not seem that beautiful to someone else. Something that was so precious to us 15 years ago may not be so precious to the generation today. So time, culture, and history constantly reshapes emotions. And therefore, one can say that emotions are not universal, which means that they are personal. So you have to keep reshaping our emotions over and over again, for which Baudrillard talks about 4 types of emotional practices: naming, mobilizing, regulating, and communicating. Naming is basically learning an emotional language, right? How do you know what you're feeling if you don't know what it counts for? So often, I mean, all of this comes in the realm of society and the world in which we live. But the world in which we live is what we are born in. So one can't be outside of it, right? So you have to learn to name what you're feeling. So if a child may not be able to say what it's feeling, but often we know, or we are taught. So, for example, if you're angry, it would be great if we are able to identify it. As often, lots of our issues arise because we don't even know how we are feeling. I don't know how I'm feeling, is what people often say, right? So, naming is a very mindful practice that art helps you do. We learn to understand what are the attendant embodied expressions that say, oh, this is what this feeling is. I'm feeling happy. They are jealous. This is sadness. This is viraha, which is pining in love. So there could be so many different forms of emotion, subtle variations, and all of that can be named if one practices it. Mobilizing, evoking or managing your emotions, for example, in performance, in music, in ritual, in protest, right? So when we mobilize these emotions, it often mobilization is connected to collectivizing. So if you're in a group, for example, all of us are sitting here today wanting to know a little bit more about how the arts can serve us better. Now that's a mobilization. But the other kind of mobilization is also to put yourself forward and say, okay, I am feeling happy today, so I will go and watch a film. Now, there may be so many others who might have also come to that same space wanting the same emotion, to share the same emotion. So that's another kind of mobilizing. And then regulating. Regulating is where, your cultures, of course, regulate your emotions all the time, how you should feel about something, how you shouldn't feel about something. But what is permissible to feel or express, now that's personal, right? So like I said, as part of human development, there is also resistance. So that both kind, accepting a certain cultural norm about emotion and rejecting it, you are allowed to do both within the fabric of society. And you need both kinds of people, and you need both kinds of engagement. If we're all accepting of everything that is there for us already well set, then we'll be a very boring, we will be robotic, we will be machine trained, right? We are human because we like and take some things and reject and say no to some others. So that's a very critical part of regulating. And so I don't mean regulating in a disciplinary way. I mean regulating in a way where, you accept and reject things. Communicating, sharing emotions socially. Now, this is where I think this whole idea of performance as emotional community. So when I perform, I create a small group of, whether it is 5 people watching or 5,000 people watching, they become an emotional community. Whether they all share the same emotions or not, that's not the issue. The issue is all of them are there for an emotional experience. What they take out of it, or if they don't take anything out of it, all of it comes within that moment, that emotional communication moment. The other, of course, these are now things that you will know already about the arts. This is what everybody will talk to you about. Oh, art gives you discipline, it gives you practice. If you do riyaz, if you do repetition, if you're engaged in a certain kind of rigor, it teaches you a certain discipline, certain patience. Now, all this is physically manifest. So when you put a 5-year-old child in a dance class, I often joke to my parents of my young students. I tell them, now the classes are in the morning at 7, and this is not just riyaz, repetition and rigor for your child week on week, but it's riyaz, repetition and rigor for the parent who needs to wake up at 5:30, wake the child up at 6:30, get the child ready, and regularly bring the child to class. So it really instills a certain rigor and repetition in the life of not just the learner, but everybody who is connected to that learning process, vis-a-vis often the family or friends even, right? I mean, I was a child when I was growing up. I would say when the clock strikes 3, I'd say, oh no, I can't spend any minute more with you. I have to go to dance class. Right. So that kind of discipline was brought into me through the arts, not through my parents. Because, my parents were also forced to be disciplined because somebody had to drop me and pick me up. from school, from class, but the arts often did that. I wouldn't say I was that disciplined as I wanted to when I went to school. I mean, to school I could go late, but to class never, because class was fun. Class was a place where I was experimenting with my emotions, so it was a fun place to go to. Anyway, so the next thing that the arts does give you is embodied intelligence. What is embodied intelligence? Intelligence that can shine through, right? I mean, often we don't know who is intelligent and who is not. And intelligence is immeasurable in the sense you have the EQ test and the IQ test, but what is that? Right? How much of one's. So the idea of intelligence here is in embodying it, in making it visible, in expressing it not just through your words and mind, but also through your body. For example, knowing through movements. I mean, I know so many people, if I put them to a test, their hand-eye coordination will be completely off. Their hand-leg coordination, simple things, right? Raise your hand to the right and raise your leg to the left. Now, they can't do this both simultaneously because they have not had that kind of cognitive intelligence developed in them. And that's such a simple thing, right? I mean, memory stored in breath, in rhythm, in gestures. These are all ways in which the body is learning to become more intelligent. And if we think that we are just merely teaching a child or a young person the art as a exercise, then we are at a loss, because what they are learning is more than just an exercise. It is embodied intelligence, empathy and imagination, inhabiting multiple roles. Like I said, an artist can inhabit so many roles all at once and still feel like they are indivisible and a whole. I mean, when I perform, I am many characters, but I'm not all of that. I'm not schizophrenic, so I don't become those characters, but I'm able to comfortably empathize and imagine those characters while staying true to myself. And that is a very critical, I would say, a critical knowledge to develop, because often in life, when we see new things, we all learn to adapt, so much so that we become that. For example, young people today, when they watch reels and endlessly doom scroll on their devices, they are so taken by what they see that often we see them make mistakes in life based on what they have seen, and what they see as real life as real life. They don't as a show versus what reality is. Now, that distinction is hard to develop in someone who stays outside only as a viewer. But if you are a performer, if you are a learner of the arts, then the art builds in you a certain intelligence to say you can empathize, imagine, imitate, and then come out of that role and character and be yourself. Because you have built that character, you have no attachment to it beyond the fact that you have created it. So you become the creator. So there's a certain sense of control that one develops when you have empathy and imagination. Plus, you also learn to understand so many people's lives and perspectives. I would say not just people's, but also the lives and perspectives of non-living things or non-anthropocenic things. For example, when I show a creeper, unless I know what the life of a creeper must breathe, how it must breathe, how it must look lush. And this helped me when I was teaching a course, again, to environmental students based on the arts. This idea that this world is built for humans is a very anthropocenic, very arrogant way of looking at this world. This world is not built for us. We are built within this world. This world is built for every living and non-living being, right? And so if maybe we are on whatever, if you want to use the Darwin code and call it the top of the pyramid, etc., we may be on top because we have a sixth sense, we are able to, but we can see right around us how much damage we've caused to the environment we live because we are anthropocenic. But if we were to shift the focus a little for a few seconds away from the humans, I think we'll understand how animals and other living beings, for example, the sea, the ocean, how does that live? What are its perspectives? These are some of the things that art helps you think about. It gives you the moment to think about, right? Because otherwise you don't get to think about you don't get to think about feelings at all. Like I said, you have to pack it and put it aside if you want to be considered a professional in this world. Listening deeply, of course, if you want to think and imagine, you have to listen deeply, cultivate a sense for others. but also learn how to dialogue, how to coexist. And I say that because in order to practice any art form, let's take the art of cinema, for example, right? Because it's a very popular medium. A good dialogue writer, a good actor, a good director are people who have a keen sense to understand others and who know how to coexist. I mean, good actors. I don't mean all actors. I mean, good actors, good directors, right? So that becomes critical. Now let's look at some of the arts in the Indian traditions. I'm just giving 3 examples or 4 examples, 4, 5 examples here, but it's no means it's exhaustive. Bharatanatyam, which is the form that I practice, Sadir, Kathak, Drupad, Karagatam, which is a folk form from Tamil Nadu, Sufi singers. I'm just giving you examples of artists from across different genres. Now, we're all practicing different forms, but something intrinsic connects all of us. We would say that one can say that it's the intersection of devotion, storytelling, and pedagogy. Pedagogy is the technique and training. Storytelling, of course, we know we're all trying to tell some story here. There is devotion, but devotion is often understood as devotion to God, which is the only devotion that we understand. But here I want to bring a slightly different perspective. Pedagogy takes precedence over everything else. I mean, if I'm at Bharatanatyam or a Sadar dancer, the first thing that I need to know, or the first thing you need to see in me is my technique. I need to be able to dance and do it in perfection and do it well, having trained for many years, for you to say, she is a Bharatanatyam dancer, or this is a Karagatam performance. So the technique and the pedagogy becomes central to everything. After that comes storytelling. I mean, I have to tell a story, and not often, I always tell young people that my art form is not a storytelling form, in the sense we don't come on stage to tell a story. We take you through many stories and we take you through the emotional moments of those stories. That's what solo dance is all about. It's not about telling a story, unlike, let's say, a play, a theater play, or a film where there is a running story. So we are storytellers, but we are storytellers, we are emotion keepers, we imagine and expand the scope of, we tease out the emotions of a particular moment. So all of that takes the next place. And the third place goes to devotion. And by devotion here, I not just mean bhakti, it can mean bhakti, the kind that is dedicated to the craft and art. So what I mean by that, a few days ago, I was part of a panel where I was asked whether bhakti, that is devotion to God, is what moves me when I perform a piece on, let's say, Krishna. I thought about it, and there was somebody else in the panel. They were also thinking, and they asked me to go first. So I said, okay. So I said, for me, as I perform, I am not thinking so much about Krishna as I'm thinking about how I am creating that Krishna, the one holding the flute, the one who is small, the one who is adolescent, the one who is with cherubic face. So my creation of that Krishna, or the imagery of Krishna, for me is more potent. And that's where my devotion lies first. So my devotion is actually my dedication to my craft, right? And when I do that, an audience who's sitting, they see what they are devoted to, which is their Krishna, maybe the idol that's there in their home, or the faith that they've had for generations in their family to Lord Krishna. So after a performance, they would come to me and say, you brought Krishna in front of our eyes. I'm sure you love Krishna as much as we do. Now, I often smile. The answer to that is, I love my craft deeply. That for me, Krishna or any image, that my devotion lies in that moment, right? Which can translate into other kinds of devotions, which can be personal faith and devotion, bhakti, etc. But so for most artists, if you ask, a good artist will tell you that, this is the translation, right? Devotion, storytelling, and pedagogy. It's a combination of these three. And imagine if you are that dedicated to anything that you do, that, your craft take precedence. I mean, we always use adages like work is worship. We don't know what that means, but this is what it really means. This is where I'd like to share a small, I won't show you the whole clip, maybe a 2-minute video clip. I hope the audio also is audible, where you can see that I am here performing to a Sufi poem. It's by Jalaluddin Rumi, but you will see how the craft takes precedence. I mean, if you can see that, but if you see the Sufi poem, then that's on you. Let's go from the beginning.
Jane Jana, Sirra Sirram Kannayam, Nure Nuram, Nure Nuram, Nure Nuram, Mancharago Pambavo, Rohannayam, Na Sufiyam, Na Safiyam, Naman Muslim, Na Hindovim, Manam Madhu Se Ulfat Kalami.
Oh, anyway, I'll stop it there. Just wanted to share that as an example to show how and what happens to the artist's mind as they get into performance. They don't, so they are governed by a deep sense of empathy and imagination, devotion, storytelling, pedagogy, all of it combined, but there is also rigor and discipline, all of the things that we just discussed. I want to take us from here to the examples of a few other artists whom I think are very, it's a great example for, especially in, in the current times. So the performing arts as an archive of memory, I will put this as a question, maybe the audience can take to the chat box to give an answer. I mean, today we've come a few years away from the COVID years. But all of us who are here will recall the COVID years. It may have brought tremendous tragedy to our lives, anxiety, depression, all kinds of issues. Today, after, I don't know, 5 years post-COVID, if we are to think back on COVID, or if I asked you to reflect on COVID, you would either take to the pen and write something, or you would look through your phone or your backup and pick up a few photographs, or you would have written something, then you might have baked a banana cake, a memory of that. So an entire critical moment in human history, just 5 years ago, not 50,000 years ago, is recorded in our memories even today, just 5 years later, only through the art practices of the time. Whether it's photography, whether it is poetry, films that were made, the home videos that you made and sent to your friends in a desperation that you were alone at home, the n number of baking classes and baking videos and whatever anybody engaged in, the writing, the reading, the anxiety, the fear. I created works of art sitting in this very room because I didn't know that if I ever will step out ever again. So the anxiety, all of that is in memory shrunk down to the photographs, the videos, the music. So that's how, I remember, I can share this with you. So when Breck, the great theater artist, was asked once, will there be music during the dark times? Breck said, yes, there will be music during the dark times about the dark times, right? So you always record with all times in history, all times of experience, all memories only through the arts. So there will be music, there will be dance, there will be poetry, there will be literature, there will be cinema, there will be photography, there will be all kinds of artistic engagement that would have captured that memory and archived it for us. And that's the only way we can go back to any memory, good or bad. Right? So what is the arts then in our lives? Is it something you can set aside? I mean, you can call a photographer to take your photographs, but still the photographs are yours. Those are your memories, right? So there is that interaction with the art, which you may think is just transactional, but you can't do without it. Right. So no family function goes without photography. Why do you think these massive phones are selling more and more? Because they bring your personal archiving experiences through the arts closer and closer, better camera, better photographing techniques, etc. Right. But also the arts bring voices of the marginalized communities to the front. That's the only way that you can bring voices to the front. There's the only way. Can it build resilience and agency? As I said, how? And how, I don't have to say how. Just a few days ago, this wonderful tar is an instrument, tar player, broke the internet. Maybe, but those of you who have no recall of it, this was the headlines, right? The Iranian artist, Ali Gamsari, performs in front of the power plant amid Trump's 8 p.m. Eastern time deadline. I mean, when the deadline was announced that this was going to be annihilated, brought to rubble, this is what we saw. Look at this incredibly powerful image. I mean, not only does he go there and sit in resistance, this image where, the background of the power plant is like a chimera, you can almost see it only like sort of lurking in the shadow. But here is this fearless tar player with his instrument, with his, his entire ensemble really just sitting there powerfully reclaiming his not just his art, but himself, his country, his voice, a resistance to global power. It was incredible. And I just want to play this again, this for you all to see.
دوستان عزیزم سلام. نیروگاه برق دماوند هستم و نمیتونم بگم جای شما خالی، به خاطر اینکه اینجا تهدید شده به حمله نظامی که امیدوارم اتفاق نیفته. دوست دارم صدای تار بتونه این بار نقش آفرینیش برای صلح باشه، برای جلوگیری از خاموش شدن چراغ خانه ها.
I need say no more. You can just go to the internet and listen to that powerful music just to say that if ever in human history we've seen any resilience, any agency, any reclamation, any resistance, there is the art that is at the front and center of that. In fact, a lot of people, until the moment they need to find a voice, will say, oh, the arts are not for me. But often you will see suddenly that when they have to raise a voice against someone, a protest song or a shlokan or something will come up. So we don't even realize that those are all artistic expressions. Gender and agency, I don't even have to say. I can go on giving you examples about how autonomy was something that was at the heart of the lives of artists, particularly the women artists, hereditary artists like the Devadasis or the Tawaives. But that's a long history. I won't go into it now because we will run out of time otherwise. I would like to talk about my guru, just an example about my own guru. I mean, her name was Sarasama, KJ Sarasa, Kalemamani, and her sisters, the Matriarch. I mean, I think I grew up with that example. I went to her home when I was 3, and here was a woman who was the leader, house chief of a family of 7 women, right? So altogether, 8 women under one roof, and she was the head of the family. And you can imagine the laughter and the noise and the fights, everything was louder than usual. It was fantastic because you realize how within a household where just women exist, the conflicts are seldom, about the same things that you have when you have a family of mixed gendered people, right? Here, the conflicts were more about emotions that defined them to the world within rather than the world outside. Anyway, Sarasama had this amazing capacity to remain the chief of that family. There would be huge fights at home. As she walks out of that hall, there would be a short passage, not even 5 meters, and she'd have to come to the dance class. She would transform and she would forget all about, the big loud noise back at home. And she would just transform into this teacher, and she would sit there and spend endless hours talking to us. And I think growing up watching so many women take charge of their own lives, to have the capacity to be autonomous, to have the agency to make their own decisions, even if it were wrong, to come back and say, okay, I've made some mistakes. How do I correct it? Do I have a community of others who will support me? Again, women, how do I make good of it? That resilience came, I think, for me as a lesson from my gurus. And so, I mean, if you're sending your child to a teacher to learn some form of art, you have to ask yourself, is that teacher as a person also worthy of emulation? Is their life showcasing strength? Because often your ward is going to pick up that personal trait also along with the arts that they teach. And this is true of any school as well. But unfortunately, we don't get to pick our teachers in school. Just saying, right? So now I'll come to the real world where, arts versus mechanization, but it's not really versus, it is with, I think, because today, as we speak, AI is taking over our worlds, but can it take over every realm of human experience? Because, I mean, after all, we are the ones who are training AI. So what do we train AI with? Are we going to train it with the same skill sets that humans have, vis-a-vis some of us knowing how to deal with emotions and some of us not, some of us iffy with arts and some of us not? Or are we going to make the machine more well-rounded? Is the machine going to learn more about the arts so that it can help us, perhaps help those of us who don't have the arts to bring it back into our lives? This is a question I put to my friends who are in the AI world. I asked them, I said, why do you want to make the AI also much like a human, right? Apprehensive, little distant from the arts. Why can't the AI mechanisms? And so he said, what would you do? I said, create an LMS or a learning model for the arts to be fed into the AI, not just mechanically, but with the emotional quotient intact, if that's possible. But all that said, I think in the human experience, there are always going to be some things that are beyond machine. So what can the human carry into the next, say, 20 years that the machine really can't replicate or co-create or imitate? And I would say that's the many shades of emotions. I say that because we know there is a beautiful text, a treatise in Sanskrit called Nayaka Nayaki Beda. And that text talks about the very many variations one can show in the many kinds of heroes and heroines, right? Nayaka, Nayaka, who are central to character building in the arts. And the author would have exhausted it to several hundreds of pages. And I think he was able to, from his imagination and permutation combination, bring about 400 and odd number of heroes and heroines with different shades of characters. And then he ends the text by saying, and I've only touched the peak of the peak of the iceberg. Now it's for the world to go and explore the many shades that there are of humans. So then you realize what a vast ocean this emotional experience is. That is something that we will never be able to exhaust, either in real life or through machines. Definitely not through machines. So arts is going to have a very central role, in my view, to play in the next 20 years, where humans are exhausted and vexed with responses that are automated. Ethics and sensitivity, I think I don't have to say much about this because arts teaches us a certain responsibility in expression. You can't express everything. You hold back certain things. You modify certain things. You regulate certain things. And you also hold space for complexity. Now, to me, that is sort of, I mean, I can rename this talk as holding space for complexity, really, because I think if anything the arts can give today's world, it is to say it's not yay or nay. It can be many things. There is multiplicity, there is multiculturalism, there is many shades, there are gradients, it's ombre. The complexity is so vast and so diverse and so nuanced that only an artist and only an artistic mind and only the arts can provide for all of that, whether it is in any like social sphere or physical sphere, whatever, or economic sphere, whatever it may be. If you're thinking like an artist, you will naturally provide the space for complexity to thrive, not just exist, but to thrive. You will actively allow another person to disagree. You will actively allow the other person to have a very different experience of the same thing that you have. One of the I will give you an example for this. So Roland Barthes wrote that, the author is dead soon as they release their writing. Similarly, as an artist, when I create a work, when I showed you that video just now, I may have had a very different idea of what I'm showing, but you may have seen it as very differently. I'm not going to be able to engage with all the 82 of you on this screen asking you, what is it that you thought? And why did you think that? No, no, no. You know what? Erase that and think what I want you to think. I will never do that. I cannot do it and I won't do it because your experiences are yours. So allowing that complexity, whereas if I'm in a classroom, let's say, and I'm teaching you some subject, I will want you to be on board. I will want you to see it the way I see it. So it is that rigidity that arts takes away. It takes it away. It takes it away and puts in its place the ability to agree in disagreement. And that is a very critical point. Finally, public cultures. Does art develop public cultures? Yes. All the festivals and the sabhas and the streets and the performances. Do we need a collective civic experience? I think so, because that's what defines us as a society. Often we hear people say this is Indian culture, this is Tamil culture, this is Telugu culture. How do we develop it? We develop it through collective civic experiences. How do we reimagine the future, whether it's a future in climate, whether it's a future in peace building? I think any alternative future involves a tar player sitting quietly in front of power plant that's to be blown up, playing his music and hoping for peace, right? So I think want to learn to be human, I would say you should engage with the arts. So there is no question of anybody not wanting to engage with the arts. It's the question of how you engage with it and how much you engage with it. But I'm going to leave and close with one reflection. And this, I think all of us can reflect collectively. What would this world look like if the performing arts, but arts in general, are not there? Just forget that there is any form of performing art. Let's not even go as far as the arts. Let's only think of dance and music and performed poetry and theater. If none of this exists in all of this world, just for a second, imagine what this world will look like. What are the things that you would not see, not hear, not know, because the performing arts have not provided it? If you just think of that for a second or for a minute, I think you will understand how significant art is to your life. So now the question, therefore, is not just in loving the arts, because we always think love is sufficient, but I think love is not enough, much like in life, in the pursuit of life itself. Love alone is not enough. We need to find the necessity, the meaning, the purpose for why we need the arts. Once we understand the need, then I think building the love is so easy. So rather than waiting for a child to love the arts before you teach them the arts, you should recognize the need for the arts and teach it to them so that they develop a love for not just the arts, but for life itself. I think I'll close there and I'll take questions if there are any, because this is a very vast, abstract concept and topic, but I can bring it a little bit closer through my experience if you have any questions.